Hey guys, welcome to My Sew Bliss. Today I'm really excited to be partnering with Baby Lock Sewing Machines to bring you another sewing tutorial on how to make the cutest little baby onesie. This one is a preemie size and could you die? It's just like the cutest, smallest thing ever. I cannot even imagine having a baby this small, and I've had 2 newborns. So that's just crazy to me. But super cute, super fun, and makes a great baby shower gift. Onesies are good for every baby. So this is an awesome beginner sewing project, or anyone who really just wants to sew a gift for a new baby, or an older baby is fine. I'm going to be doing the 12-month size. I'll put a link down below for the pattern that I'm going to be using. I really love this pattern. It's from Peekaboo Pattern Shop. And it's awesome because it has so many options and you can do so many different things with it. So the possibilities are truly endless. So you're gonna need the pattern, and then you're gonna need some really cute fabric. I'll leave a link down below for where I love to get my knit fabric. And then you're going to need your sewing machine, and I'm gonna be using my Baby Lock Brilliant. I love this sewing machine. It is a great intermediate sewing machine. If you want to take your sewing to the next level, it has a lot of really great features. So definitely check that out. I'll leave a link down below for that machine as well. I'll be using it to sew this cute little onesie today. And other than fabric and your pattern, your sewing machine, you're also going to need some snaps for the bottom. That's how it closes and opens. So I just put 3 snaps along the bottom. I have links down below as well for how to put snaps in and the different kinds of snaps that I like to use. These ones are metal. I also have plastic ones that I really like as well, which are really good for baby clothes. So other than that, you're just going to need your basic sewing supplies. So let's get started. For our first step, I'm going to take my back piece with right sides up and lay my front piece on top of it, right sides together, and I'm going to match up the shoulder seam, which is this little spot right here, so cute and little. I'm just going to match those up, and then I'm going to go over to my machine and I'll show you how we're going to stitch those down. So because we're using knit fabric to make our onesie, I'm going to be using a zigzag stitch on my machine. That is number 5, and I'm just going to leave it at the regular settings, but that way when this stretches, and especially at the side seams, the seams won't pop because there will be enough of the thread to stretch with the fabric. If it was just a straight stitch, it could break when the fabric stretches. So that's important when you're sewing with knit fabric, to make sure you're always using either a zigzag stitch or a stretch stitch, which some machines have and some machines don't. But either one will work just fine. So I'm just taking my shoulder seam and right sides together, gonna stitch that down. For my next step, I like to do things a little bit out of order, especially for baby clothes because they're so little. So instead of putting the sleeve in to the onesie next, I'm actually going to put the cuff on. So this is the cuff. I'm going to put it wrong sides together and match up the raw edges on this long edge. And that I'm going to pin to one sleeve. So let me take those apart real quick. There we go. So once I have those lined up, my raw edges, I can pin this to the sleeve at one end, and then it's going to be stretched to fit. So I'm just going to pin this other edge to the opposite end of the sleeve, and then when I'm sewing, I can stretch this cuff to fit in there, just like that. And that way we won't have to worry about trying to put the cuff in when the sleeve is already put in. So we'll do the same thing to the other side. So now I'm going to sew the cuff in. So I'll just take one pin out and hold it with my fingers. And I'm going right along that edge where all the raw edges are meeting up. And again, do a zigzag stitch. Once you have both of the cuffs put into your sleeves, now we're going to put our sleeves into the onesie. So I'm going to put them right sides together just so I can find the middle of the top of it. And if you made sure to mark that when you were cutting it out, there might be a little mark there, which is awesome. If you didn't, I just like to take a pin and pin that, and then I take this and we're going to do it right sides together. It's going to look a little strange at first, but you'll see how it's going to work out. So I'll take that, and that pin will line up right with that seam, our shoulder seam, and I'll put that in place. And then I'm going to take this edge and match it up with the edge of the onesie and pin that right there. And just this corner is what we're doing. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side and do the same thing. Pin that. And that's where our side seams are. So we just want to make sure that sleeve's going to match up with the side seam. So I pin that. And typically once I pin that, I like to go around and do the other side as well. If that's a little too much, just do that one and we'll sew that, and then you can come back and do the second one. Okay, so I'm gonna take, it looks a little strange right now, but it'll all work out. So I'm gonna go to one of my side seams where I pinned that corner. And I'm just gonna take that out and hold it with my finger, making sure it stays aligned. I'm gonna put it under the presser foot. Here we go. Okay, and then I'll start stitching. And I do like to back stitch as well. So then as I sew, I'll just try and make sure that those edges stay lined up as much as possible. You might have to go slow and maneuver it, and that's just fine. I can take that pin out and do the other side. So there I have that sleeve set in right there. So it can look a little wavy, but we can iron that and smooth that out. Mostly because I just did all that stitching, all that stretching, getting tongue-tied. So now I will go and do the other sleeve. When I have both those sleeves set in, I actually like to just stay at my sewing machine, and I like to go to my sleeve and line up the raw edges, line up those seams that we have, and line up the sides of the onesie. And I'm just going to stitch all the way down the sleeve, down the side seam of the onesie. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Now, if you feel more comfortable, you can go and pin that first and then come and sew it. Another thing that I like to do while I'm sitting at the sewing machine is take my neckband piece and put that right sides together and sew that along this short edge. And that'll get it ready for us to put in. So now to put the neckband in, here I have it. This is the seam that I just sewed, and I'm actually going to open it up and put the wrong sides together so that seam is pushed together like that. And mine wants to roll, so I'm just going to take some needles and pin it so that the right sides are out. And it'll look a lot better and work a lot better for me. Okay, so now that it's pinned a little bit more, I can work with it. But I'm going to hold that seam that we just sewed, and I'm going to find the middle on either side. So hold that seam to find this middle, and I'll put a pin there and mark that, because now we can put it onto the onesie, and we're going to put it on the right side. So right sides are going to be together, and I like to line that up so we have equal stretch throughout, with the center front and the center back. So I typically can just eyeball it, but if you want to fold the onesie in half and find that, that's a great idea too. But then I just take that middle and pin that there, and take this seam, I always like to put in the middle of the back so that it's a little more inconspicuous. And I'm pinning so that all the raw edges are lined up together. And now I'm ready to go sew it in. So I just pin it in those two places, because then I'm going to stretch the neckband to fit all the way around. And I'll show you right now how I'm going to do that. So I like to start in the back. So here's that middle part. Mine wants to curl on me, so I'm going to have to mess with it a little bit more. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'll just start a little bit before that pin and put it under my presser foot. And as I'm sewing, I'm going to stretch the neckband, but I'm not going to stretch the onesie. So that can be a little tricky. So go slow and just try and fit it as best you can. Okay, so I'm making sure those raw edges are lined up. Do a few stitches and then take my needle out and continue stretching that and sewing around. So once that neckband is sewn, you can just flip it up all the way around. Make sure it looks good. And one way to give it a really great finish is I like to put it on a straight stitch. Oh, I want mine more in the middle. There we go. So the 3. And I'm going to go right along the edge. So not on the neckband, but right past it. And do a top stitch that's going to catch that seam, because it's pushed down, so it's right here and I can feel it. I'm going to catch it right there, and that's just going to give it a really nice finish, and make sure it holds that seam down and the neckband doesn't curl up again. So I'm just going to start in the back, and you don't have to do this, it just gives it a really good look and keeps it looking nice. Okay, so once that's finished, you can see how it just gives it a really nice look. And again, I'm going to probably press that just so it isn't so wavy. When you stretch it out like that and sew it, it gets a little wavy and wonky, but if you press it with an iron and use some steam, it should go back to normal and look just fine. So now we just need to finish off the bottom. Here I have my leg bands, and I just started pinning them because they want to roll in on themselves just like the neckband did. And over here you can see I started pinning it. So what I did is I have put the bands wrong sides together, and I'm going to take this end, and with the right sides together, I'm just going to line them up with the bottom of the onesie. So this is going to be where the crotch seam or the snaps are that would go over the diaper. And I'm going to pin that, and it'll go right along here. So really it'll wrap around the leg. That's why it's called the leg bands. So I'm just gonna pin it, match it up with this raw edge. This is like a 90-degree angle, looks about. And I'm just gonna pin that because now I can take that over to my sewing machine and stretch that to fit and sew. And I'm gonna do that to both sides. I'm gonna take that, and even though I took the pin out, I'm just gonna hold it with my fingers until I can get it under the presser foot, just like that. It can be kind of tricky, especially with this fabric that wants to curl, but there we go. Okay, so with the raw edges lined up, I'm just gonna stitch right along there. It's very similar to the neckband. We just don't have a round circle. This is just straight. Oh, I didn't switch back to my zigzag. Okay, I'm going back to number 5 and doing the zigzag. There we go. And I'm going to stretch that to fit all the way down. Let's see, making sure those raw edges match up, and I'm not stretching the actual onesie, but just the leg pieces. Okay, so once that side's done, I'll just go and do this side. After you put those leg bands in, one thing that you can do to make it look a little nicer, a little more professional, is just like how we did the neckband at the top and did that top stitching to hold down that seam. You can do the same thing around the leg, and I'm gonna do that just to hold that in place, and I think it actually makes it more comfortable for the baby as well. So that's not rubbing against him quite as much. It's more laying down and flat, and looks a lot nicer. For our next step, we're going to finish off this bottom edge. And the first thing we need to do is actually just add some interfacing right along here. So I'm going to take my pieces. They're a little bit shorter than what is required, but I'm okay with that. This is just going to help our snaps so that every time you snap and unsnap them, it's not going to stretch out the fabric. It's just going to last a lot longer. So I'm going to take my interfacing, and with the bumpy side down, take it over to my iron. And whatever kind of interfacing you have, just follow those instructions. This just says steam and press, and I can't even remember what length of time, but I'll just sit here for a minute and press that, and then I'll go to the other side. With that interfacing in place, next I'm just going to take it and fold it up, fold this raw edge up 3/4 of an inch, and press that. And then we're going to take that over to our sewing machine and stitch that down. So I'm going to do that side and then this side as well. Over at my machine, I'm going to go with right sides up, and I'm going to stitch this down. I like to stitch from the right side so I can see how it's going to look like on the outside. And I'm just going to be stitching about 3/4, a little less than 3/4 of an inch, so that way I catch that raw edge. If you want to, you can actually serge this beforehand. I'm just going to do a straight stitch. It's not really necessary with the with this knit fabric. Now our final step is going to be setting our snaps. So here I have 2 that I've already set. They are snapped right now because I want to show you how I'm going to line those up. So each one is exactly the same, but you are going to want to make sure that they're going to line up correctly when you're putting these pieces together, because you don't want it to be really off. That one is pretty off. I should have lined it up better and pulled it over a little more, but the farther you get, kind of the easier it is. And you want to make sure that this flat part is showing. This can come in white, silver, black. I'm sure it can come in colors. You can get plastic snaps. I have a whole tutorial, a couple tutorials on different snaps that I like and which ones are my favorite. I was going to use plastic for this, but I didn't have a color that I liked that would go with this color scheme. So I just went with these white ones, and I'm really happy with how they look so far. And then you also want to make sure that on the inside, you also have the flat piece because that's going to be touching baby's skin. You want that to be nice and soft and smooth. Well, actually, it's going to be touching the diaper, but you still want it to be nice and smooth. And then here are the snaps in the middle. So let me show you how I'm going to put that together. And actually, I want it snapped at first, so that way I can see how it's going to line up. So for this, I'm going to start with this top one, and this is called the prong, and you're going to place it where you want it. I want to place it kind of to the outside, but not too far. And it gets a little tricky if you place it on the seam. I'm going to have it kind of halfway on the seam. So the layers are pretty thick, but then you just want to press that in so that the prongs are starting to go to the other side. And if you press it hard enough, you'll start to see it coming through the fabric. And this is kind of thicker fabric, so it's a little trickier to see. You can kind of see them starting to poke through right there. Because then I'm going to take this little piece, and this is the socket, and you want to make sure you're doing it the right way. And again, you can go watch my tutorials on how to do this more in depth, but you want to make sure the raised part is face down. So I'm going to flip that over. And it's kind of tricky to see with this one, but you just place that right over the prongs, and you'll kind of feel it fit on the prongs and into place. And I like to just sit and squeeze it with my fingers for a minute. And then when I'm doing these metal ones, I like to use this small little Dritz tool. Super easy to use. I just use that, I place it right over, and then I just use a regular hammer. And hit it in place a few times, and there we go. So now that that's in place, I'm going to do the bottom one. And again, I'm going to keep it snapped, make sure it's lining up correctly. See, this one's going to line up a little bit better than this side, which is nice. But again, I'll just take the little prong side, and I'm going from the inside, but I like to hold it together with my fingers, just like this, and kind of feel where it's going to place. I don't want it coming off the edge, so I'm going to make sure that edge is inside too. And kind of feel where the back of that is, and then squeeze it together. You can also just mark it with a marking tool and then do it and then place it, and that would work too. But then I'm just going to do pretty much the exact same thing, just with a different socket. So I push that in. And this one actually is called a stud, not a socket. So the stud has that raised piece in the middle. Let's see if I can turn it. You can kind of see. It's kind of hard to hold on to and show you guys. But right there. And then I place that right over those prongs and push it into place. Again, it's going to kind of lock in place, and then I put this right over it. This has a hole in it that locks that little stud into place, and then I hammer it in. Okay, and then once that's in, I snap it, make sure it's looking good and lined up, and that's it. Now I have all of them in place. So I just go along and do that with all of them. And I suggest going one and then the bottom, the top, then the bottom, top, then the bottom. So that way your placement isn't off, and just looks really good and clean. And there we have it. And then once you get those snaps put in, you are all done with your baby onesie. Didn't that just turn out so cute? Oh my gosh, I love it. I want to make a million of these. So cute, so awesome, and every baby needs some cute onesies. So makes for a perfect gift. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more tutorials, especially baby clothes, baby items. I just love sewing baby stuff. So I'm excited to do some more tutorials with Baby Lock sewing machines. And if you want to see more of my tips, tricks, and everyday sewing life, you can check me out on Instagram at My Sew Bliss. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them in the comment section down below. Again, I'll put any links or anything I talked about in the description down below as well. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.